All right, it's stupid versus spread. We are now in bowl season. Aside from the Army Navy game, which we're going to cover first, had some great conference championship matchups. Some somewhat surprising losses. USC losing to Utah a second time, I think, came as a shock to um, most people. I don't know if you agree, Mike.
Yeah, I think so. I think Caleb Williams' injury sort of changed that game, but
Yeah, I mean he was limping the entire second half. And Utah's a good team.
mhm.
Not going to brag. I did say they'd win the Pac-12. They actually did when we covered that back in August. Now, Jesus.
Yeah,
But yeah, so they Utah won. USC didn't have a great game. Get knocked out of the college football playoff. The playoffs are now set, which we will talk about in the next episode we do in about a week and a half. But we're going to cover the Army Navy game today, and then roll into the first half really of bowl season. We kind of broke it down by Christmas Eve and before is the first half, and the second half will be after that to include the college football playoffs and New Year's Six Bowl. So let's get into it. Army Navy game. The last regular season college football game of the year is upon us this Saturday, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. Eastern kickoff, if I'm not mistaken. You might correct me if I'm wrong. Um, but the 4 and 7 midshipmen
three
are,
p.m. kick.
yeah, 3 p.m. Eastern kick, so 2 p.m. Central Time.
Yep.
So uh, 4 and 7 Navy, 5 and 6 Army. Neither have been great this year. Although some have had like more explosive offenses than we've seen in the past. But this game will be played at Lincoln Financial in Philadelphia. Good weather, 10 mile an hour winds, 46 and sunny. It's supposed to be. So it should be a great game, great matchup. And it's unfortunately the only matchup of the day for college football playoffs. Um, but Mike, let's roll into it. So typically, we see a lot of unders. So the under has hit like 16 times in a row this game. Academy unders themselves hit at like 70%, something crazy. But go ahead, give me your pick for this game. Tell me what you like about your pick, and then I'll do the same.
I like Army in this game. I know that all of the trends are going the other way. The public is on Army at 56%, but the cash is on Navy at over 90. Um, this series tends to go back and forth. The more talented team is Army. They proved that last year. They went 8-4. Lost a very disappointing game to Navy last year. Um, Granted, Army, and I say more talented because Army's been pretty underwhelming this year compared to where they were, but they still have the best player in the game, who's Andre Carter, their defensive lineman. But Jeff Monken has proven himself to be somewhat of a better motivator than Ken. I'm not even going to try to butcher his last name, Nui Atamalolo, something like yeah. Anyway, the Navy coach, and and
Good attempt.
and so I think that you see this game swing back in the other direction this year, despite the sharps being on Navy. I think Navy gave Notre Dame a good game in a spot where everybody expected them to. And really, Notre Dame was very much on their way to covering that game before they sort of just stopped playing football. Um, I think you throw the records out a little bit in this game every year because, like we saw last year, the team with the better record doesn't necessarily always win this game. I think you have to go off of recent momentum or recent results to a lesser extent to know who's going to have some sort of um, chip on their shoulder going into this game.
Right.
And um, Army has not. Um, they haven't lost for a lack of scoring. They're averaging 29 points a game. I'm not touching the total because the total's 32. I think that's just everybody usually takes the under in this game, so take the under again.
Yeah, it's hit 16 years in a row, so
Yeah.
there's reason to
So
take it.
and because these two teams play with a lot of motivation, they're very careful. They don't want to lose a game. They run the football. It's you. The game moves very fast, so I understand the logic behind the under. I think this year it might go over. I am not willing to put that on my card. But I do think that Army has the offense to score, has the better playmakers, and I think that they are going to be motivated to get a win in this game, and that is why I like Army money line. I think if you like Army plus 2.5, you like them to win the game. So just take them to win the game. You win or lose, you ride or die with a single um, wager here. So when I drafted Virginia to place my legal wagers this week, uh, not because of any bias towards Army, although I am. I do think Army is going to win this game. I think that they flip, they get it back this year. Because I think they have the better players. Whether or not they played better this year, I do think they have the better players.
I don't hate the analysis. I again bias as well, but I do think Army kind of has an edge here. I think a lot of the way people saw Notre Dame and Navy play, which is typically where a lot of people will the only time they'll see Navy, unless they're a fan of the AAC, and Army is independent, so it's they play a lot of FCS teams, which is why if they win a game at this game, they don't have a bowl game at 6-6 because they beat two FCS teams. So I don't hate the Army pick. I'm actually going to go over here. These two teams, their defenses are decent, but not great. And normally, when you think triple option, you think low scoring because you run out the clock. But in the past couple games against FBS teams, the Army team has scored 44-34. Those were its last two games against UMass and UConn. Now, granted, not great teams, but neither is Navy at 4-7. Similarly, Navy at the Notre Dame game scored 32 in that loss. They also scored 27 against Temple and 20 against Houston. So both these teams, I think, have the capability to go over the number almost by themselves. I could see this being a very run happy but quick running, the way they've kind of been doing it in the past. If you look at passing game from Army Navy, they don't pass the ball a lot. Army only has 900 yards through the air, Navy only 1,000, but they have decent completion percentages at like 55, which is not great, but when you're not passing the ball that much, that can be the difference between a big play and not. They don't allow many sacks, and as far as the rush yards, both these teams have over 2,500 rush yards on the season. So, both are going to be running the ball, attempting to run the ball a lot, but these teams have 4 and 5.5 yards per carry, respectively, between Army and Navy. Army has 40 rushing touchdowns. Navy has 21. So I think the Army team can. I like the analysis that the Army team's going to win here. I think this number, for the first time in 16 years, does go over. These teams just know how to score, and granted, they play each other tough, and this will be a very physical game. But I think you'll see a bit more success running the ball than we have in previous years, just because I don't know that either of these defenses have the capability to stop each other. So I'm going over, and with the number so low, I'm going over 32.5. I think this will be a fun one to watch. I'm hoping they score a bunch of points. But yeah, the game in the past has gone over 32 a bunch of times. Usually the line was at 42, which is where you'd see them kind of like stop right before 42. It'd be like 38, 39 points scored. So I like the over here. I think this over hits for the first time in 2 decades.
Yeah. So I've been trying to figure out where the logic is here on the Navy, like that, why the heavy betters are so heavily on Navy. And based on their results this year, the only thing I could think is that it's recent results. Navy lost to Notre Dame 35-32. Like I said, in a spot that everybody expected them to play it close. But Notre Dame was up 35-13 at the half and didn't score after halftime. So that should have been a walk in the park that Notre Dame, like I said, just stopped playing. And then Navy did beat UCF 17-14 last week, or 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
So I guess the argument is that they're playing better. Before that, Navy lost to Cincinnati 20-10, who UCF beat. They went to overtime against Temple, and then the week before lost by 18 to Houston. And then the week before that lost by 6 to SMU. The only common opponent the two teams share is Air Force. Air Force beat both teams. Air Force scored 13 on both teams. Navy scored 10. Army scored 7. These teams are extremely closely matched based on their only common opponent. And while, yes, UCF is a good win for Navy, they don't have any really other good wins on their schedule. Army also had beat UConn by 2 scores. They lost to, and their close losses are also of note. They lost to Troy 10-9 and UTSA in overtime. UTSA they lost 41-38 week 2, but Troy they lost 10-9 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. So, like I said, I think Army is underachieved this year, but I don't necessarily think it's because they're the less talented team. I think their results just haven't bounced in their favor this year. I think beating UConn, who is a bowl team, and as much as we'd like to make fun of UConn, they did make a bowl this year, which means they
They
have
did.
6 wins.
They did.
Yeah. So beating UConn
Shocking.
by 2 scores at home is a nice win. They played some more tough games, so if you're saying I don't think that Army can win this game, that's not accurate. Army can absolutely win this game. I think, like I said, I go back to all that matters in this series is who has the motivation against the other team. And I think Army will be extremely motivated to win this game. So I like Army here to win money line.
Okay, I like it. Okay, well let's roll into the first half of these bowls. Couple like as we all know, as we get later into the bowl season, which is really the tail end of December, the games get to better and better matchups. So the first half of these matchups are games that some of these teams will really care about, but you'll hear stupid shit from people like, "Oh, these games don't matter." These games matter to a lot of these players, and there's some good matchups here in the front half that you normally wouldn't get because bowls are designed, as you may or may not know, to bring together out of conference opponents. I don't think there's a single in conference matchup in bowl games on purpose, with this like the exception of if you make the college football playoff and it just turns out that way that's where your ranking is. So let's get into it. We got a couple of great games. I think the first that comes to mind. So we're going to go in order of the date these games are in. So we'll start at the 16th of December. We got 2 games, one in the early morning, one in the midday. So the first one's the Bahamas Bowl, UAB versus Miami. UAB is pretty heavily favored, but the one we'll highlight is the Cure Bowl, Louisville at Cincinnati. First of all, I'm sorry, that's on the 17th. The 16th is the Cure Bowl, Troy UTSA. Should be a great matchup. UTSA and Troy, very two good G5 teams coming together to play each other. Both they're champions of their respective conferences. And UTSA, I think, has really taken a prominent role over the past couple of weeks. They have won like 10 straight. I think their only 2 losses this year was at Texas and the first game of the year in Houston, which is obviously a tough matchup. And then same for the Trojans, who are 11-2. Their only losses were at App State in that thriller of a walk-off, I believe, was that one, and then at Mississippi, where they got beaten by 3 scores. So two great teams, a tight spread. UTSA is about +1.5. So Mike, give me a pick for this game and that we're highlighting here.
I don't have any picks for this game.
Oh, okay.
I will just say styles make fights here. They're ranked 24th and 25th, both 11-2, like you
Yes.
said. Troy is 10-3 against the spread, which is almost more impressive than being 11-2. But UTSA has the 20th ranked offense according to PFF, while Troy has the 7th ranked defense. So if you're looking for one side of the ball to watch in this game, that would be it. The UTSA offense playing against the Troy defense. If you put a gun to my head, I would take UTSA because they've produced more NFL players and because I've seen them play Power 5 competition close more recently. That is the dumb brain me because I don't watch UTSA football. But if you, like I said, if you put a gun to my head and made me choose, meet me.
Yeah, I am going UTSA money line here. I think they have a very good offense. Their Troy has a habit of turning the ball over a little more. They have about one interception a game, which is not great. UTSA, on the other hand, kind of takes care of the ball. They've only had half a interception per game based on stats. Both fumble decently, but not too much. And Troy's passing, or I'm sorry, UTSA's passing offense is pretty good. The only two they don't have too many injuries. These teams are going to get up to play for this game. It's a great ranked matchup. It's going to be fun to watch. I'm very excited for this game. I will be glued to my television on December 16th for this Friday game. But I'm taking UTSA money line. I think they come out on top in what should be probably one of the better bowl games of this first half of the season. Okay, we'll move on to the 17th of December. So we got a couple games, and then we'll highlight which ones we're going to talk about specifically. So there are 6 games on Saturday, December 17th. We start at the Fenway Bowl, Louisville, Cincinnati. The New Mexico Bowl is BYU, SMU. The Jimmy Kimmel Los Angeles Bowl in Englewood, California is Washington State versus Fresno State. The Lending Tree Bowl is Southern Miss versus Rice. The Las Vegas Bowl is Florida at Oregon. And then the Frisco Bowl late at night, North Texas versus Boise State. All those games in chronological order, pretty much of when the kickoff will be. But we're going to highlight 3 of those, which is the Louisville-Cincinnati game, the Washington State-Fresno State game, and the Florida versus Oregon State game. We'll start with Louisville-Cincinnati. Mike, you said you had a pick for this one. Go ahead.
I did.
I don't know.
No, I think this is really interesting because Cincinnati hired Scott Satterfield away from Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
And Louisville has Brian Brom coming in from Purdue to take over their job. Brian Brom, great quarterback, great NCAA football. I believe that would have been the 2000, let's go with 8 edition of NCAA football. He was the quarterback for Louisville. Really, really good quarterback for them. Anyway, I enjoyed playing as Brian Brom. Anyway, I'm not gonna play this game because I have no idea where the if you're asking, I think this is a broader problem that I'm trying to figure out. Like we talked about, you touched on it. For bowl season is figure out the team that has more motivation, put your wager on that team. Here, the wager and the motivation really, I think, has to be with Louisville because Scott Satterfield walked away from that program to go to this program. Whereas Luke Fickell left Cincinnati. He's going to coach them. I don't. Is he going to coach them in the bowl game? I don't even know.
I don't. Let's see. I don't think he'll be coaching in that bowl game. Typically, coaches don't.
And so, if he's not coaching, they're going to get. I would assume like Satterfield can't be coaching this game. So you're going to have 2 interim coaches, but the team with much more motivation here is going to be Louisville. Absolutely. Add on to that they played better through the second half of the season than they did the first half. And Cincinnati this year 3-8-1 against the spread.
Yeah.
Line movement's been pretty significant. Opened at Cincinnati -1.5 all the way to Louisville -2.5. So I don't have a pick here, but like I said, if you were forcing me to pick, I would take Louisville. Purely based on the fact that they're going to want to get one over on their old coach's new team and roll into the Brian Brom era, who I think is a better coach than Scott Satterfield. I don't know why Cincinnati hired Scott Satterfield away from Louisville based on his record at Louisville. I know he was a good coach before that, and I think he may be an alum. That might be the only reason why they hired Scott Satterfield, because I believe there were rumors he was going to leave. That was the whole, the best thing I love about Louisville is the airport. Or the proximity to the airport quote from Scott Satterfield. I also saw something funny that because his account is verified and with Twitter's new rules, he can't change it with he can't change his handle without approval from Twitter, and his handle is it's like Coach Sat or Coach S U of L. So now he's this coach of Cincinnati, but his handle still says U of L because he can't change it, which
That's
is
funny.
hilarious. But either way, I think Louisville has the more reason to get up for this game, so I would take Louisville.
Yeah, I also think Louisville kind of has an edge here. They are favored by 1.5. I
I'm
think
gonna add it. I'm gonna add it.
I think Cincy losing Luke Fickle to a Power Five school is tough. Fickle will be coaching a bowl game. He will not be coaching the Cincinnati Bearcats. He intends to go coach as the head coach for Wisconsin in their bowl
Wow.
game. Interestingly enough, which is very, very rare. I don't remember ever
I
hearing
don't think
about
I.
that.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
But I mean, good on him. He wants to get involved in the program, and he obviously is a hands-on guy. He says he envisions taking the role of the head coach, but not like he's trying to figure it out. And I don't blame him. That's obviously a tough to like roll into a team's
Yeah,
locker room and be
especially
like,
because
"I'm the head coach," and 2 weeks from now we have a bowl game.
Leonard is gonna be there for that game.
Correct.
He is
Correct.
still
I think he's
coaching.
staying. I think he's staying on as a coordinator.
No, he announced yesterday. I think he's leaving, which I think makes more
Oh
sense
yeah,
for the.
that's right. That's right.
It makes more sense for the program if he leaves because you're gonna have the old dad, new dad sort of conundrum
Yeah.
within the program if Leonard stays. I think as nice a story as it would be for Jim Leonard to stay and be the DC there, and he seems like he's a good coach, so they would probably love to have him. I think under their current arrangement, it just doesn't work, and I think it makes more sense for Leonard in this situation to get a fresh start somewhere else. He'll be a pretty sought after defensive coordinator. I
I
think
was going to say he's probably. I think he's prime for a G5 head coaching job. If we're being honest.
yeah, I would if he wants it, he can go that route. If I were him, I would probably. I think you're probably better off taking another Power Five DC job, especially under like a very established head coach, because I think you can probably, if you do well in a year, you could parlay that into a Power Five job. Whereas if you take a Group of Five job, you're probably not moving for at least a couple of years.
Yeah.
So, um, so if I were him, I would probably recommend taking another Power Five DC job if there's one open. But either way, I think going back to my point, I think Louisville has way more motivation for this game, and so that's why I'm adding.
Yeah, I like the pick as well. We'll move on. So Florida at Oregon State. Oregon State is 10-point favorites against Florida. Of important note, there's heavy betting on Oregon State, and I don't think anybody believes in Florida. Do you agree, Mike?
I think it's more where is the focus of your program. Like Jonathan Smith at Oregon State has had a great year. They want to cap this off with a bowl win. They're 10-2. They're great against the spread. Or sorry, they're 9-3, but 10-2 against the spread. They've been pretty consistent and good all year. They play good defense. They play hard for him. This has been a really good year for them, and this would be a great way to cap it off for them. Meanwhile, Florida never
Anthony
really cared
Richardson.
about this season.
Yes, and Anthony Richardson is declared for the NFL draft and will not be the quarterback of the Florida Gators in this bowl game.
Yeah, and
Which is important to note. Which is probably why the line has moved where it has. It opened at I believe like 7, and then jumped to 10.5.
yeah, it's that, but I also think so. Billy Napier picked up another top 15 recruit in the class of 24 today, a quarterback out of Texas. So that also tells you where the focus of Florida's program is right now. They don't care about this game at all. I like if Billy Napier was actually coaching this game in any meaningful way, I would be kind of surprised. He is currently focused on grabbing guys out of the portal to flip the roster and recruiting for the upcoming years, which is what Florida's paying him to do. And
True.
it's what they're paying their recruits for. Um, so it allegedly paying is an inducement allegedly.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we know how it goes.
Yeah. So overall, I think I I think that Oregon State's going to have way more motivation for this game. Florida will not be up for this game. We saw this last year too.
We
Granted,
did.
Dan Mullen was already fired. Billy Napier wasn't there, but I think the result still holds that Oregon State wins this game should kill them. I would be shocked if it's a less than a 2 touchdown spread. And Florida might look a lot like LSU did last year for their bowl game, where they only had like 45 rostered players and almost couldn't play the game. You could see something very similar here, depending on how many guys at Florida have been told they're not going to play next year and that they're looking for somebody to replace them in the portal.
Yeah, and so I have two picks here. I think I'm probably going to lay the minus 10 with Oregon State. They've been a very good team this year. Florida looked awful this year, and sometimes these SEC teams, when they don't perform up to the standard of what SEC teams want themselves to be, they kind of like take a nosedive at the end of the season. I think you saw that a little bit with Florida. Back to back losses to end the season. As a heavy favorite against Vanderbilt too. Their offense is stifled. Their defense is eh. So I also like the under 54.5 here. I think with their quarterback out, who's gonna be behind center. I think Oregon State wins handedly, but I also don't know that Florida really picks up the ball that much to score. So I like the under 54.5 here. And the line has started to move that way. So um, people kind of agree with me. The last game we'll cover from the 17th of December, which is a Saturday, Washington State, Fresno State. This is a really good one. So Florida, Oregon State, I think a lot of people will watch because the names involved, but I think it'll be more of a blowout. But this Washington State, Fresno State game might really be worth turning on instead of that game if that becomes a blowout. Fresno, obviously, a pretty darn good G5 team, went 9-4 this year. Um, the Washington State Cougars had a couple big wins, got out to 7-5, so not um, the worst season of all time. They did end up losing to Washington pretty handedly and Utah, but those are two great Pac-12 teams, as we've kind of discussed. Mike, you got a pick for this game? Which way you leaning?
I am leaning towards Fresno. I go back to this. We've been on it all week, or sorry, this whole show. Motivation, motivation, motivation. And this is going to be a system that we're going to try out for the first half of the bowl season and see if it still works. G5 team against Power 5 team in a bowl game. Take the G5 team. Motivation will be there to beat the Power 5 team. Power Five team is probably moving towards who's available in the portal, who can they grab, who are we recruiting, how are we getting better, did we fire our coach, are we moving in the right direction, do we know who we are, what's the meaning of life, anything but playing the actual football game. Whereas the G5 team involved will absolutely want to win that game, will want to get one over on a Power Five team. So using that logic, I'm taking Fresno. I see it somewhere between -1 and -1.5. I'm going to take Fresno. They looked really good at going to Boise State last week in that conference championship game in the Mountain West. They played that game at the blue turf, won it convincingly thanks to a punt return and a couple turnovers against the team they had lost to by 20 earlier in the year. They're playing really confident. Jake Haener looks really good. So I like Fresno here -1 to cap off a Mountain West championship season for the Bulldogs.
I agree. I hate that we agree on so many of these. But yeah, I think Fresno has a little more to play for. Washington State, I think they'll get up for this game a little more than others, but I think Fresno's just maybe a little bit of a better team. There's a slight money advantage based on percentage of bets on Washington State. Um, I like the under here. So I don't hate your pick. I probably lean Fresno, but I like under 54.5. These two teams played decent defenses. You know, Fresno held Wyoming to 0 points. They've only let up 30 points once in their past 5 matchups. Washington State a little more loose with it, but aside from their loss to Washington, who's a very good team, they haven't let over 21 points in the last 5 games, including Utah, who they lost to 21-17. So I'm leaning on the under here. I think these teams, they kind of lean the under a little bit, but I think their defenses are good. But I don't expect too many explosive plays between either of these teams if their defenses play like they've been playing. So I'm going to lean the under and the Fresno money line um, to top it all off. We'll move on to our next round of games. So the December 17th, big week for big day for bowl games. There's nothing that Sunday, but then we have games leading up to Christmas Eve. So the 19th, the Myrtle Beach Bowl, Marshall, Yukon. December 20th, you have the famous Idaho Bowl between San Jose State and Eastern Michigan, Boca Raton Bowl, Toledo versus Liberty. And on the 21st of December, the New Orleans Bowl of Western Kentucky versus South Alabama. Those will all be pretty good matchups. New Orleans Bowl is usually a lot of fun. They tend to highlight the city, and Western Kentucky is fun to watch. But we're going to highlight the Armed Forces Bowl on December 22nd. Baylor versus Air Force. This is probably the best matchup um, aside from Troy, UTSA, and probably Fresno, Washington State. We're trying to pick out the games that are going to be pretty close in spread that might be a lot of fun to watch. So Baylor Air Force, Baylor's -6 right now. It looks like it's trending that way further. Um, I'll go ahead and tell you, Air Force is pretty darn good. They can move the ball a little bit. They can air it out, which seems like a pun, but isn't really. Baylor, on the other hand, ended the season with 3 losses to Kansas State, TCU, and Texas. So they were struggling a little bit at the tail end of the season, but money and percentage of bet slips are heavy on Baylor right now, upwards of 87 and 80%. Mike, do you have a pick for this game?
Yeah, I like Air Force here. Same logic. They group of 5 team against a Power 5 team. Dave Aranda, off a disappointing season, knows he has to go get some dudes. He'll be out in the portal. He'll be recruiting. He'll be trying to make that roster better. He won't be focused on this game. I get it. It's close to home. It's in Texas, but a lot of Air Force support down there because not only is this game the Armed Forces Bowl, but the game is in San Antonio. What's the not Fort Sam is there, but there's an Air Force base there. Um,
So yeah, this is in Fort Worth, the Armed Forces Bowl. They're
oh,
playing
I
at
thought
they're playing at TCU Stadium.
I thought they did they move it? Don't they usually play it at the whatever the San Antonio Dome thing is?
No, for the past couple of years, it's been at Amon G. Carter Stadium at TCU. I know because Tulane played there circa 2019, 2018, and I went to the bowl game. Um, so they've been playing at Fort Worth for a while, but still,
Either way,
Dallas
game
does
is
have a
in.
few
Yeah,
bases outside of it.
hang on. I will find this. I know this game was played uh, at different locations previously. But either way, um, I like Air Force here. I know the game's in Texas. Point still stands that in Texas there are sizable Air Force bases, including one on the way to Oklahoma City. I'll find it. But there will be a strong Air Force contingent at this game. So not necessarily a home game for Baylor by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure not many Baylor fans will actually care, given that the team is 6-6, whereas Air Force fans will care. Not that fan advantage really matters in a bowl game, but like I said, Air Force will have the motivation here. Baylor will not. Based on that reasoning, I like Air Force in this one.
Yeah, it's fluctuated a little bit, but it is trending a little bit back to Baylor on -6.5. If it hits +7, I'll probably take Air Force. I think Baylor will struggle to cover a full touchdown. I do like the under here, 49.5. I think if Baylor doesn't wake up, Air Force scores occasionally, but they're much better at playing defense than they are. Like that's how they've won their games is these low scoring affairs where their defense doesn't let up more than 10 points. Um, in fact, in their past 5 matchups, Air Force only let up more than 14 points once, and that was in a loss. So to Boise State. So I think Air Force has a really good defense. I think they're going to run the ball down Baylor's throat. So I think it's going to be hard for Baylor to cover. the -6.5, which is why I like your pick. But I'm going to take under 47.5 here, or I'm sorry, under 49.5. The under has not been trending. It's actually opened up at 44.5. It got all the way up to 49.5 where it sits now. So I'm going to take the under here. I think the line has moved in your favor. I think Air Force can stop Baylor. I think Baylor maybe doesn't come out as explosive as we think they're going to come out. So I think less points. You see the clock running a little bit. I think it'll be a good low scoring affair that turns into a good game. So that's what our hope is that these games are good. But I don't see 50 points between these two teams just because of how Air Force plays defense. And if Baylor wants to win this game and cover, they will be holding Air Force in the air and on the ground. Okay.
Lackland Air Force Base is in Houston. Shepherd Air Force Base is in Wichita Falls.
Yeah, and those bases will absolutely be putting out massive like go to the game kind of things. So I would expect a pretty even crowd between Baylor and Air Force, just between the two bases there, and the fact that Baylor is obviously in Texas. Other three games that are going on after that: December 23rd, the Independence Bowl, Houston at Louisiana; Gasparilla Bowl, Missouri at Wake Forest. And then the Hawaii Bowl on December 24th, Christmas Eve, 8 p.m. Eastern, San Diego State versus Middle Tennessee. That one's a lot of fun just because they do a lot of highlights of Hawaii. You get the beautiful coastline. It may be 8 p.m. Eastern in Eastern time, but it is like 2 p.m. Midday in Hawaii, so you get that nice little dichotomy of it's nice and dark where you're at, but you get to look at the beautiful Hawaiian coastline and all the shots they do. And San Diego State, Middle Tennessee, not too many points between them. 6.5 favored to San Diego State. Mike, do you have any other picks from the games we've discussed or not discussed, but talked about them broadcasting? Because I have a few. Okay, I have three other picks. So I have Wake Forest -2 playing Missouri on the 23rd. I think both these teams I would say Wake had a good season. I don't think Missouri, by any stretch of the imagination, had a good season. I think Wake will be up a little more for this game, kind of cap it off. Wake has 14% of the bet slips, but 50% of the money. So that's kind of a play on the spread that we've kind of done most of the year. I think Wake comes out on top, probably by a field goal, if not a touchdown. I like Houston -6.5 against LA Lafayette. These are both two G5 teams that are decent. Houston had a rough season. I think Dana Holgerson's going to look to kind of advance his team from 7-5 with a bowl game, make that season look a little better. So I like Houston in a rout by at least 7, and then SMU +1.5 against BYU. This pick is just that BYU looked really bad down the stretch, and SMU didn't.
I like that. I had it and took it off, but I do like that.
And I know BYU beat a few teams like in November, but they looked awful in October, losing as heavy favorites to Liberty and ECU. SMU's only real loss in the past 5 games was Tulane, who was their conference championship, where they got destroyed by Tulane. But I think SMU comes out fired up. I think these are both two evenly matched teams and two great games. So like it's a lot of fun to watch. But like I think SMU covers by 1.5. All right, so that is our part 1 bowl game preview. Stay tuned. I think around the 20th or 22nd, we'll release our part 2, which will include the entirety of the college football playoff preview, as well as all the New Year's Six bowls, which are like definitely the high end tiers of games. But this first round of bowl games should be a lot of fun. And also make sure to like and subscribe and tune in for our NFL show that we do once a week. We're going strong, getting a little clearer playoff picture for the NFL, so it should be a lot of fun. But like and subscribe, and thanks for watching.